This week on Three Questions with Corey Kareem.
How many times in my life I feel like I disqualified myself? Like, it's like playing tennis. Tennis, I feel like, is one of those sports where you beat yourself. It's not your opponent that beats you. You can beat yourself, and that's why you lose. And I said, why don't you let them tell you no? And I was like, all right, fine. I already have the no. I already don't have this opportunity, right? So, but why don't I just shoot my shot and I'll let them tell me no? It kind of shaped me into the detail-oriented person that I am today, because I was like, I never want to feel that.
Never turn back. Only go clockwise. Never go back.
Now, before we get started with this beautiful conversation, please help a brother out and click on that follow button on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Three Questions with Corey Kareem, the podcast where we sit down with some amazing people who are doing some amazing things. And that's right. You guys see, we ask them 3 questions, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I know. I read the comments. But rather than just talk about my guests, their wins or their successes, we start the conversation around their failures, more specifically, the lessons that they learn from those individual experiences. So, with that being said, my next guest is a creative producer with over 6 years experience in brand strategy, production management, and client services. She's a Spotify alum. That's actually how I know her. And previously worked in creative operations. Some of her recent quotables that I really love include, I quote, "My trainer always says it doesn't get easier. You just get stronger." Quote number 2, "When I think about how much we are conditioned to avoid failure, it pains me because failure is how we move forward." So without further ado, the one and only Texas finest, Jasmine Marie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I feel so special being invited to a podcast. It's crazy. People want to hear things that I have to say. So
Listen, let me give the context. Let's give the backstory here. So,
yes.
Guys, I met Jasmine, this beautiful young lady in Los Angeles, LA. We were at a Spotify dinner just before the Ad Color event. And we just had a random conversation. There was a couple of topics, and homegirl was going in. I was like, wow. I was like, listen, I didn't agree with one part, but like the way you articulated your thoughts, your viewpoints, I was like, you could be like White House chief of staff.
I definitely miss my calling as a lawyer, for sure.
I mean, girl, you can argue a point. I will give you that. And I was like, I got to connect with this young lady. I got to have a conversation because it was, I learned something that night, honestly and respectfully. So I'm glad you're here today. So welcome. Yeah,
glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump right into this. So Jasmine, I mentioned in the intro that I tend to start the conversation around, failure, mistakes, however you want to, phrase that. So with that in mind, tell me about a moment in time where you had your biggest challenge, mistake, setback, however you want to phrase it. What happened? How did you overcome it? And most importantly, what did you learn from it?
Ooh, when you say biggest, it's just so funny to me because it's like I feel like my entire, like the last 10 years of my professional career have really just been a series of failures. Kind of like falling downstairs. We were just like bump after bump. I think one of the biggest ones that really set me back was when I had to drop out of college. And so basically I went off to, I was raised, my parents, I love my parents. I have amazing parents. They raised me like college is just not an option. It never felt, it never felt like something I could opt into or opt out of. It was very much just like, this is what you're going to do. And so by the time I reached college, I was transferring in. I actually did an early college program in high school. So I graduated with my AA degree at 16 years old. So off to just like a running start, right? And then mom basically held me for 2 years because she didn't want me going to a college campus at 16 years old, which, like, absolutely yes. And so for 2 years, I just kind of did like random electives. I worked full time, worked with different mentors, just was kind of like keeping me busy until I was old enough to go off and be on my own. And then when I went off to Belmont University in Nashville, and it was one of two colleges that I applied for because I'm very much a put all my eggs in one basket girly sometimes, like for better or for worse. And I ended up getting in. And what I didn't know at that point is that my family, we couldn't really afford that school. It was a private school. It was very expensive. I think it was like 60 grand a year.
Damn.
Yeah. It was
grand.
it was really intense, and it was out of state, right? So it's like,
of course,
this is out of state private school tuition. And so somehow my parents managed to get me in there for a year. And I was, in a very privileged spot to not really understand my parents' situation financially. And in hindsight, I probably could have seen the signs, but I also think my parents felt a lot of pride around taking me to the school that I chose, right? Because that's how they raised me. They raised me to think like, no, this is what you have to do. So when I was excited about a school, they kind of just were like, we just got to figure it out. That's the school she wants to go to. She got in. So I get there and I just completely blow it, right? The first semester, I'm bored. I all through high school, I was working full time and going to school and making straight A's. So then I stopped working to go to school and I just was bored. It wasn't even that I couldn't do the work. I just didn't care. And I was tasting freedom for the first time. And, there's no one over my shoulder to kind of tell me to go to class. And so I kind of like bombed out the first semester, right? And I was like, dang, this is crazy because all these classes are easy. So the second semester, I was like, I'm gonna get my act together. Got straight A's the second semester just to prove that like it wasn't a matter of capacity. It was just me really just being wasteful, like not caring, not thinking that, not understanding how much it took for me to be there and to keep me there. And so after my second semester, despite making straight A's, I lost any type of like scholarship funding that I'd received because I failed the first semester, right? So I disqualified myself. And I think that's like a bigger message of how many times in my life I feel like I disqualified myself. Like it's like playing tennis. Tennis, I feel like, is one of those sports where you beat yourself. It's not your opponent that beats you. You can beat yourself, and that's why you lose, because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I begged and pleaded, and basically the only way for me to stay was to incur just ridiculous amounts of debts, which I'm so happy that my parents were like, absolutely not, you're coming home. Because I'd probably be sitting with like $100K in debt still to this day if I had my way about it. But I viewed that as like my biggest failure. I was so ashamed of it. When I came home, I just enrolled in like a local college and ended up graduating. But I wasn't with my friends. I didn't have that university experience. I didn't have my own apartment anymore. All those things just kind of got stripped away. And then I had to watch my friends kind of go on without me on Instagram and just feel left out. And I wallowed in that for a good 2 or 3 years of just feeling like the world had like done me wrong, I've done everything right, except for the fact that I didn't. But, I was like, average it out, I did one bad semester. Can we come up with the average so I can show that like, no, I'm normally pretty dope.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was one of my biggest failures for many reasons, and probably not for the reasons you think. It's not I didn't feel necessarily the shame because I had to drop out or anything like that. The shame that I felt, and the reason I probably in hindsight would consider it my biggest failure, is because of my level of entitlement. The level of entitlement that I had at that moment in my life was insane. Like, it was insane because I viewed something, even something like my parents' money, I just viewed that as like, I deserve this.
Right.
Like, and that could be a product of them teaching me that I did, right? That's how I was raised, that was just like a given. But my entitlement was insanely crazy. And so when it was taken away from me, because again, I disqualified myself, when it was taken away from me, I felt like the universe had like done me wrong. Like, how could you do that to me? I'm, like I did most of what I could do. And I think it was so important for me to learn that lesson then. I'm so glad I learned that when although the stakes still felt high, but in contrast, the stakes were so low, right? And I think a lot of people walk around the world disqualifying themselves and feeling like the world is doing something to them when they're in fact disqualifying themselves because we have this entitlement that we deserve, XYZ, like whatever it is, insert thing here. And I think like a smaller example that I'll share is that I was really into fashion in college. And at the time, Nashville was it was on year 3 of their fashion week. Like they had like invented a fashion week, and it was very new and very small, very indie. And I signed up to be a volunteer. And I was so excited about it. I had my outfit picked out the night before. It was going to be a vibe. And I remember getting there, and when I walked in, not even 60 seconds later, the woman who was in charge immediately dismissed me.
Really?
She was like, you have to go. And I was like, wait, why? I just walked in. It's like 6 a.m. You know what I mean? I'm not getting paid for this. This is a volunteer opportunity. I'm offering to work for 15 hours for free. So in my mind, I'm like, yo, like, what is it? And she's like, your shirt is not black. I was wearing a black blazer, some black leggings, and like a black but it was like multicolored, like a black theme, but like a multicolored shirt. And on the volunteer packet, it very clearly stated
black shirt. Black. Yeah.
Right. So when she saw me, immediately she was like, go home. And I was just like, ugh, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not even getting paid for this. And I remember it literally going right back to my dorm and feeling so like embarrassed and ashamed because my friends were like at my apartment and they're like, yo, you just left. Like, what are you doing back? And I'm telling them this story and I'm like, I don't know who she thinks she is. And I remember I had one of my college friends be like, but you're not wearing black. And I was like, yes, in fact. And I say all this to say I want the headline of this to be like, let's bring back embarrassment.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Bring back embarrassment, because had I not learned that lesson, I guarantee you from every opportunity I took from that moment.
Yep.
Guess who was reading all the instructions? Guess who was reading every packet? Who was asking questions? Like what time I'm supposed to be there, what I'm supposed to look like, what's the parking spot, what shirt am I supposed to wear? Yeah. That uncomfortable moment, while it was uncomfortable, while I was embarrassed, my face was hot. Yes.
Yeah.
But it kind of shaped me into the detail-oriented person that I am today, because I was like, I never want to feel that again. And again, I wasn't getting paid. I didn't get fired. I didn't lose money. So the stakes were, again, very low. But I learned the lessons really early. And it just goes into my, my whole theory about like, failing is how we move forward.
I love that. There's so many things that percolated my mind when you shared that story. Thank you for sharing both of those stories. So one, I think of Tony Robbins, great motivational, inspirational speaker. He shared a story that when he was like 12, 13 years old, I guess he always used to see like his dad or some older figure in his household drink beer. And he tried to, I guess, sneak one in for himself, and his mom caught him. And she was like, oh, so you want to go and drink that at 12? Okay, you know what? If you're going to try and drink one, I want you to drink the whole 6-pack. So his mom, I know this is going to be crazy.
It's got to be a generational thing, because I've heard this type of story before.
His mom made him drink the whole 6-pack. And of course, he got sick. He threw up. He got nauseous, all the symptoms. Till this day, this guy's never had a drop of alcohol because of that moment. Right? just the smell of beer for him is like triggering for him now. Is that
Ooh.
extreme? Yes. But it kind of reminded me of that story. That moment just shaped him so much. He never had an interest in drinking anymore. And then there's something that you said, kind of like how we kind of cheat ourselves. Well, I'm going to paraphrase what you're saying.
Yeah.
We kind of cheat ourselves out of opportunities. And I strongly believe that. I think of myself. I actually have a story similar to one of the stories you just told. So I was when I was in school in New York, I did an internship at MTV, and I was interning with two other guys. This guy named Kyle, and there was a guy named Miles, and they sent out this email saying, "Hey, come take a silly photo. The silliest photos are gonna get chosen, and we're gonna put it up on the billboard in Times Square." And we're all talking about it. It's like, should we do it? Should we go do this photo shoot? And I was like, man, what are the odds that one of us are gonna get picked? Like, what are the odds? Come on, there's like how many people that work? This is Viacom.
I was about to say, is it company wide?
Yes,
like,
it was a company.
Okay,
company wide, right? Not just our little department. This is company wide. This is Viacom. I'm like, what are the odds? They're like, we're gonna go. Guess what happened? Both of those mofos got their pictures selected, chosen, and they, for like 2 weeks, they had a big ass poster up on Times Square.
And that must have been back when that was not something you could just arrange.
No,
you know what I mean? Back when Times Square was like a very coveted. I mean, it's still coveted, like media real estate. That's crazy.
Yeah. So right there on the MTV building, and I was just like, man. And I learned my lesson. So similar to, I was like, just go for it. Like, what do you have to lose? The worst they can say is no. Like, what's the worst that can come out of it? And I think, and it's so funny you're talking about that. And I'll talk about this towards the end. So one of the projects I've been working on, you know how there's these dating card games are so popular now. There's like so many of them. So I decided to come up with my own, but it's not for dating at all. It's actually to help you improve the conversations you have with yourself. Because here's what I discovered. And to your point, no one will talk you into or out of more things than yourself. So if you don't know how to have, healthy conversations with yourself, let's just call it that. To your point, Jasmine, you can literally cheat yourself out of opportunities, everything from a career to the guy or the girl you just saw, you name it. You could just like, no, I'm not, whatever. Right. So it's incredible because I look at my life sometimes. I look back, I was like, man, I talk myself out of this, out of that.
Ooh.
Crazy.
Look, too many things, and it's so interesting. I came to Spotify through a creative fellowship,
right?
Which is a very, very competitive program that Spotify, and a lot of companies do this. Google does it. Other big tech companies, Apple does it. It's called Apple Orchid. These creative fellowships, and Spotify is a global company. It's a huge company. I'm just like some chick from Texas. Like, I don't even think they have an office. I think they have an office in Austin, but I was living in Dallas at the time. And it just seems so far away. It just seems so far-fetched. And I remember, multiple people sending me the application. I had chewed on that application for at least a month. And the problem was they had created a position for creative operations, and that was the first year they were doing it, right? But the application only supported submitting work examples that were design focused, copywriting focused, or brand focused. So the prompts for like how you applied were only those three things. And I was like, but I'm not these three things. And I'm also not applying for these three things, right? I'm applying for something you guys just created, but the application process didn't match that. So I was just so conflicted because I had to choose between things that weren't my medium to try to prove that I could do something that wasn't even that. So I chewed on it for so long. And I remember maybe like the day it was due, I was like, I'm just not gonna do it. I sat at a coffee shop for like at least 3 hours on my laptop, just like trying to brainstorm, trying to figure out how to make this work. It's not really working. Should I do this? But this is not my thing. I'm not good at it, so it's not gonna work. And I remember packing up and getting up and leaving the coffee shop and just sitting in my car and saying like, yeah, I'm just not gonna. This is not for me. Like, not only can I not display my personal strengths, I'm definitely not going to stack up to the thousands of people who are very strong in these three things that are going to be applying from really all over the world, right?
Right.
And I remember I had an hour. It was like 11 p.m. The application was due at midnight. And I sat in my car and I put it in reverse and I was like, I'm going home. And I put it right back in park. And I said, why don't you let them tell you no? And I was like, all right, fine. I already have the no. I already don't have this opportunity, right? So, but why don't I just shoot my shot and I'll let them tell me no? And then, you know, I didn't lose anything because I technically already have the no. I don't have the opportunity. Went back in the coffee shop, hammered out the application, which was not an easy application, hammered it out in an hour. Like I just hit like, I don't know, I hit God mode. It's like you know, when you have to do something for some reason, that's like the best motivation. And then all of a sudden you get that spark and you're just like, you know, the cat's on the laptop and you're just like, yeah, I got it. And obviously we all know the how it turned out. I got it, right? This is a fellowship that accepts 4 people a year and thousands of people apply. So when I ended up getting it, I just remember just crying like real tears because I was like, I was about to disqualify myself again. Like, have I not learned this lesson by now? You know, and it doesn't always turn out that way. You know, you could just get the no,
right,
and that's fine. But my whole life changed because in that last hour, I decided to I'll just let them tell me no, and then it'll be for real no. You know,
Right. No, I love that. I just had like a aha moment because it's the way you phrased it. You said I already had the no because I didn't have the opportunity. And when you phrase it like that, you're like, yeah. So it's like, what do I have to lose? Man, I love that.
Literally an hour of time. That's it. An hour of time that I could have just been watching TV and you know what I mean? It's like the hour that I spent working on that application could definitely have been spent doing other things, but look what it yielded.
100%. Didn't you go to like Cannes and
they were making fun of me because you mess up when you let me in the door. I tell people that all the time. If you don't want me to maximize the experience, just leave me on the outside because as soon as I'm in, you know, I was at the Cannes Lions Festival standing next to X, like, yo, what's up? In France, you know, I was at the LA office. I was at the Atlanta office. I was at the Miami office. I was, you know, based in the New York office. And when I was accepting the next, I kind of became like a den mother to the next group of fellows that came in. I was they were making fun of me and they were like, we should get you a Spotify passport. Cause like you've traveled so much with Spotify. And it's really just because I got in there and I started asking questions and I started being really curious. And I was just like, it's just like how we met. You know, I sat next to you and I was just like, so what's up with you? Like, what's going on in Toronto? Like, I haven't been there yet.
Yeah. You got the juice. I knew that within like 5 minutes of talking to you. I was like, you're different. So
do my best.
All right, let's talk about content creation, something that you excel at, right?
Okay.
And let's more so talk about what that looks like moving forward. So as the creative industry becomes more tech driven and with AI tools becoming more advanced, do you feel the role of the human creator is in jeopardy, or does it simply mean we need to evolve into something new?
I hold a lot of feelings for this particular topic, you know, because on one hand, I'm like, of course I'm freaked out. I think AI is going to and is eliminating entry-level roles in every industry, right? So and I feel a certain type of way about that because I wouldn't be where I'm at without the opportunities that are now disappearing, you know, the different internships or just entry level positions where you're probably not handling the most technical aspects of whatever the company is doing, but you are there and you're learning and you're going to be there at some point, right? Like we all have to go run and get coffee for people until we can be the people that get coffee brought to them, right? So it's like I'm seeing AI kind of erase those opportunities because there's just no need for a human, you know, in the industry's perspective to be doing those jobs. So I don't like that, right? That's not super great. But at the same time, I saw a meme the other day that was like, oh, we don't have to worry about AI because in order for AI to complete a task, the client has to know exactly what they want. And it's like, you know, obviously it's a tongue-in-cheek reference to the fact that AI is still, AI still needs the human component to function. Someone
100%.
still needs to be there to prompt it, to shape it. And I've been in different design sessions watching people work with Midjourney and things like that and seeing how much prompting goes into creating the images and the videos that we see. And we see a lot of things on social media that look like really interesting and really cool. And I'm like, yeah, but how many prompts did it take to get there? Because when you start off, you're like, the hands have 8 fingers and, you know, the head's turning in a haunted way. Like that's not how humans work. So I think it's something that creatives, if you care about your career, you should be monitoring. You should be treating it like a tool the same way you're like, I know how to use Google Sheets. I know how to use Excel. Yeah, like you should know how to use Chat GPT. You should know how to use Midjourney if you're on the more design specific side of the creative industry. But at the same time, I do feel like a lot of industries are very bloated. And I think we've gotten used to this sense of excess, especially in the tech industry. In the tech industry, you know, we've got, it was like the gold rush. So you could get like a really high salary. You could probably not work that much. And honestly, I think day in the life TikToks ruined everything. that's my other hot take. I think that the layoffs are directly related
to TikTok
video content.
Video content. Interesting.
About what my day in the life is as a tech company. All those videos are like day in the life working at Apple. I wake up at 10 a.m. I check my emails. I go to Pilates. I take a walk. I grab a snack. I check one more email. I go back to a Pilates class. And I just feel like at some point, somebody, HR is watching and they're like, oh, so we don't need 18 people to do this job. Maybe we only need 8.
That's
and
fair.
10 people get laid off. Right. And so while I don't, you know, layoffs are so traumatic and I hate that. It's like, sometimes I'll be working on projects and I'm like, it truly just doesn't take this many people to do this. If anything, this many people working on this project is hindering the progress of this project because everyone wants to justify their position by having an opinion on what's going on. And so, yeah, I think that there's going to be some sort of natural rebalancing of what it takes to put out work. And unfortunately, that's going to have like a very real impact and implication on people's jobs and things like that. And AI is no different, you know, like AI is going to impact. But if we rewind for a second, there was a point in time where people thought the television wouldn't be the most dominant media source. You know, there was a point in time where people aren't going to leave radio. Like television, that's boring. They may watch it for 30 minutes a day. And now, like, look at what television is now. So how many radio stations were put out of business? Or dramatically downsized? How many people lost their jobs because, you know, now you need to go work at a TV station. If you don't know how to work that technology, you're in the dust. So it's a natural part of evolution. I do feel like people have not watched the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, and it shows. Because we are steady trying to create the one thing that we've made so many movies about or will be the end of us, but whatever. But yeah, I think, you know, it's something we all need to be paying attention to, but I'm not as worried as I think like the rest of the world is. Right.
No, I think there's something that you hit on that really resonated with me. And you said it's where AI is causing, let's just use this word, destruction, the most disruption. Is with the entry level kind of those kind of low level tasks.
Right.
Because I did see a stat somewhere, and I'm probably misquoting the number, but it says AI is going to eliminate like 89 million jobs, but create 96 million. Right. And I
Yeah.
think though those new jobs that are going to be created are going to be high skill, probably related to STEM of some sort. And I think that's what's going to be difficult. So I
Yeah.
do like I agree with you. There's pros and cons to every technology, every tool. And I think for me, I definitely embrace it. The way that I use it the most is with emails or any type of copy that I have to come up with. And usually how that works for me, Jasmine, is I'll write the original draft. I'll put it into chat and I'll say,
Yeah.
I'll prompt it, hey, I want it to sound more diplomatic because maybe I'm too stern in my tone and this and that. And then it'll come back and then spit me out this. And then I just remix it. So it's in a little bit in my own words. But for
Right.
me, I think the overall sentiment I have about AI in general is learning how to embrace it. Because it's not going anywhere. So it's
No.
nothing that you can fight. Or at least if you fight it, you're not going to be successful. And I think it's, an onus back on us to how can we increase our skill set? Because I
Yeah.
do think, to your point about the TikTok videos ruin tech jobs. Yeah, maybe our people are like, maybe this is too easy for you guys. You guys
I
are making
mean,
six-figure
if you got time to
salaries.
go to 3 Pilates classes a day
you
and I'm
know,
paying you 6 figures, I need to reevaluate why I need 800 people,
right.
at this level.
So that is a fair assumption. No, I take you that, but I also, I'm a big believer in the saying, focus on what you can control. And what you
Absolutely.
can control is your effort. So
Mhm.
however you want to use that, if you want to focus on the doom and gloom of it, sure. But then you can say, what are the skill sets that I can develop now that will put me in the best position to make sure that I'm playing offense more than defense? And that's just one way that you can look at it.
Mhm.
Now, in a similar fashion, in a time when the creative industry is thriving on digital platforms, what's your take on the rise of instant content versus traditional slow burn projects? In other words, is quality being
Mhm.
sacrificed for speed? Because a lot of the platforms say, post multiple times a day, how many times a
Yeah.
week? What's your take on that?
And see, I think it's really interesting that the general public, we've moved away from that super polished
Mm,
production and super polished look. I think TikTok is just like honestly one of the most disruptive platforms we've had in like the best in the best way and in the worst way, right?
mhm, mhm.
Depending on how you look at it. But Instagram traditionally, like if we're talking about the millennials Instagram, it was very curated,
Yes.
very perfect photo flat lays, like, people bent over backwards trying to make their images like the most curated, back when Instagram feeds had to have all the same color tones. Like,
I
what's your
remember that.
color palette? You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's like
yeah,
you really have
yeah.
to stick to that. And TikTok literally is just like you can see that as the new generation being like, I'm recording a video on my phone like this in a bonnet, and it's
Mhm,
doing numbers,
mhm,
right? It's going to reach 1 million people. None of these people are my followers, if any.
mhm.
And you're engaging with it because it feels more approachable. I think that generally as a
Mm,
society, we got sick of being sold to.
right.
Like all these millennial brands, these direct to consumer brands that spent so much money investing in the perfect picture and the perfect aesthetic, the pendulum has to swing the other way at some point. Now
Mhm,
we want
mhm,
authenticity, and authenticity to us means not produced. It means you didn't
mhm.
spend $800,000 making this,
Right.
commercial or this post. And so, there's an upside to that where the barrier to entry into content is like really
Super
low.
low. Yep.
There are people who got on TikTok 3 years ago and they're now millionaires simply because, and they didn't need a fancy house or the perfect kitchen or, all these things. You can meet them where they're at content wise, and they can still do numbers, still sign brand deals and things like that. So it's nice because it once again democratized
Mhm,
entry into the content game, into the personal brand game.
mhm.
The bad part about it is that there's just so much.
Too much.
But you have to wade through
Yeah.
to like get to the good morsels that it's just overwhelming. So I feel like, you know, and me and my friends and contemporaries have been speaking about this very often. Like, what is the next frontier? Like, have we not done it all? We're now getting into a place where creators are suing each other for copying each other. But it's like, if you go on TikTok, you'll hear the same hook
right
80 times.
100%.
I mean, at one point, someone put together a compilation. There's someone selling remineralizing gum, right? It's gum you chew and it helps remineralize your teeth, like to help heal your cavities. And they compiled 60 seconds of at least like 50 different creators saying, my dad was one of the top dentists in Texas, and he would prescribe this gum all the time, right? Completely different people, completely different places, but they're all using that same hook. And it's just like, it's almost become like a repeat of a repeat of a repeat of a repeat. And so it's annoying. It gets overwhelming sometimes that it's just like, all of this is basically just false, right? Like all 60 of you can't have dads that were the top dentists in your specific state that also are selling this $30, you know, remineralizing gum. And right now, I don't know what your feed looks like, but everyone's pushing this one specific purse. And I get at least 20 ads every 5 minutes about this one specific purse. And it's so obvious that these companies are like pushing it out, right? So I don't know. I feel like the next frontier and the result of all this like super fast content is not being on your phone at all. And we've been talking about this for so long. Like, what does it mean to almost go back to the original celebrity of someone who like doesn't have to be on social media, someone who's unplugged, someone who's more about in real life events, more mysterious, which is very interesting because in order to know they're mysterious, you have to also know who they are. So it's like this kind of loop that you find yourself in where it's, again, how does someone enter that space? Like, how do I build a brand if I never post? If I'm not on? Or what does it mean to build a brand outside of social media?
Those are very good questions. There's a word that you use that really resonated with me, and that's overwhelming. I think I kind of have this theory that, you know, back in the early 2000s, you know, humankind asked for more transparency. Humankind then created this thing called social media. And now we're like, what the fuck? Now you know what everybody thinks, their thoughts, their opinions, their views, and it's overwhelming.
Neighborhood gossip. I shouldn't know about this.
And now it's just like, I even had to catch myself. I was like, I'm consuming too much content. I feel like burned out, and it's not even like work related. I'm just hearing too many POVs, too many thoughts, whether it be political, whether it's Drake or it's Kendrick, it's just inundated. And I was reading somewhere that the average person takes in about 2,000 ads a day.
Jesus Christ.
And the average person living now, I'm going to probably misquote this, takes in more information in like a few years than the average person did in like the early 1900s, their whole entire life. Like what we take in a day is more than someone who grew up in those times took in their entire life. And the thing about it, a lot of it is so subconscious. Like we don't even realize that our brain is absorbing all this information. So I totally agree with you that for me, the big thing is social media can get very overwhelming. And it's also addictive. Like I'm not a scroller, but when I do have the moments where I do scroll, I'm like, whoa, I could see how people do this for hours and hours and hours and hours.
I had to do kind of a little bit of a detox. I did it early last year. I did two things. I did a timeline cleanse where I took like an hour of, you know, time that I was like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to clean my timeline. And I unfollowed people. I marked not interested on things on my For You page for about 20 minutes that I just didn't want to see. And basically my timeline was my friends, beautiful images that inspired me, architecture, travel, nature, whatever, and puppies. Like, I was like, that's all I want to see. And I think sometimes we forget that our digital window into the world that's in our hands, our phones, we still have a lot of control over that. Like, even though the algorithm is serving you up things that you're interested in, you can also go in and tell it what to serve you up and tweak it. And so you do have control to kind of, if we're going to be on it anyway, why not fix it to be what we want to see, or things that are uplifting? And so that was the other thing. That was one thing. The other thing I did was I just got off of it for a month. And
I did it fast.
Yeah, that was last January. And I think what I realized, and it was around the time that I was birthing my creative support group called Junior Year that I recently launched. I told myself that while I was writing the scripts for Junior Year for the masterclass, I would not take in other people's content because I kept feeling like up until that point, I'm spending the whole, you work and then I'm writing these scripts at night, but that for the 8 hours that by the time I wake up and by the time I get to my laptop to write my own scripts, I've changed my mind about what I want to say 8,000 times. And it's simply because I'm seeing what everyone else is saying. And I feel like I need to react to that. Like, I feel like I either need to react to it or I need to tailor it so that this type of person wants to hear it, instead of simply asking myself, what do I have to say? Regardless of who it's for or how it's received. And it helped me so much get I got my scripts done in a month, and it was really helpful because it was like shutting out the noise. And sometimes when I open my phone, I won't turn on the sound for at least 2 or 3 hours in the morning. So I'm not going to sit here and act like I have this perfect morning routine where I don't look at my phone for the first. No, it's definitely the first thing I grab in the morning. I definitely check my emails within 10 seconds of opening my eyes. That's just how my life is right now. Yeah. But I will say I can't listen to people talk. So like I'll be scrolling, but I'll have to read it. And it's a small change, but it's absolutely insane, the difference of, I don't think we realize, like, hearing, you wake up in the morning, the first person's voice you're supposed to hear is like you maybe if you're married, like your partner, your kids, your parent. Like, it should be people that like you love and you care about. It should not be someone in Wisconsin talking about, here's a story time about how my husband cheated on me. Like, that should not be the first thing your brain takes in the morning. And so I started turning the sound off, and it kind of makes a world of difference. I don't know. You should try it. I want to see if you tried and you feel anything.
I like that hack. And I've definitely done a few social media fasts myself. One of the social media kind of hacks I used to do to kind of protect my mind, because there was a period in my life, if I'm being super transparent, seeing other people's success on social media used to bother me, especially if I knew them like personally. And I knew they weren't that great. And I see those things, and it used to bother me. Like, I'm just being 100 right here. And so there was years where I didn't scroll. That was my way of protecting my mind, protecting my peace. And still now, for the most part, when I'm on social, I very rarely scroll. So the only time I'll see something that's on your feed is when I open up the app and you just happen to be that first.
Be there.
Yeah. That's it. Because I don't go on anybody else's story. I still practice that to this day, but I love that. I'm definitely going to try that for you. So
what's interesting about what you just said, and I want to make this note really quick because it's an idea that I've been exploring. I follow James Clear on Instagram, and he posts he's an amazing author, posts different quotes. And one of his quotes that I'll probably be butchering right now was, instead of increasing your willpower, remove the resistance. And I think that, when I wrote, I had a section in my master-ish class that was called Rest as an Action Item. And one of the things I said that creatives should be doing as a part of rest is unfollowing people that make you feel insecure about yourself. And this was kind of like a controversial piece of advice, like when I was talking to people about it. They're very 50-50 split on this. Like, you have the people who are like, well, it shouldn't bother you. You should be happy for them. Like, and yes, in theory, absolutely. It's not a pie, it's an ocean. You getting a bigger slice doesn't make me get a smaller one. And so, yes, logically, all these things make sense, but we're still talking about a human brain. And a lot of times people give advice from the place of what the world should be and not what it is. And if you're not honest with anyone else, the one person you should be honest with is yourself. And so if you are following people actively, even if they can be your best friends, and the things that they're posting elicit a physical response in your body, whether you feel like, because jealousy is still an emotion. It's still something that happens, even if it's not something you act on or you should use as a decision maker. Yes, but we still feel it and it's natural and that there's nothing wrong with it, is obviously as long as you don't act on it in some like messed up way. But you can say congratulations and mean it and still feel like, dang, like, what am I doing with my life? And I said, unfollowing those people, like, it'll make you feel some type of way. It'll make you feel shamed. Like the act of unfollowing those people might make you feel a little bit ashamed because you're like, I shouldn't feel this way. But at the end of the day, instead of trying to have more willpower about and white knuckling through how you feel about something just to feel like you're this evolved person, take away the resistance so you don't have to white knuckle it. And then I feel like it will actually make you happier for people who are successful because you are addressing that within yourself so you can show up as a better friend and a better community member when they are having wins and like maybe you're not.
Right.
So interesting to kind of chew on.
I love that. You know what? I realized I have been doing that. You just described what I have been doing. I also did that with like, because I have a sweet tooth. So rather than trying to say, I'm only going to eat it on this day of the week, I just remove it from my household.
Right.
It's not even here. Right.
Yeah.
But I love what you just I remove the resistance. I love that. And I think that is a tactic that we should probably look more into. And at the end of the day, if it works for you, it works for you. And I think the benefit or the value I can see in someone employing that tactic is, if they're being deliberate, it will give them the time and the space to evaluate why they're really feeling the way that they feel when they see those images or they see that person. Right. And I think it gives that people that time, that space to do that. So I love that. James Clear, Atomic Habits. If you guys haven't read that book, amazing book. So now let's talk about it. You know what I want to talk about. I know you're going to get fired up. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up DEI. So is DEI now DEAD as in dead? Did it ever really exist in the first place as it was intended to? And the follow-up to that, Jasmine, is as a young Black woman, what do some of the changes under the new U.S. administration mean to you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had like a cookie cutter answer for this, but I don't. Like I'm holding multitudes of different emotions and feelings about DEI. I do think, in its current state and form, it is dead. And I think it's so funny to me because there's this massive group of people in America who decided, to kill it. And they decided that it's this one thing. And all it reminds me of, I just keep seeing this parallel, not to get too political, is Obamacare. That's what it reminds me of. Because if we rewind, 12 years, the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, and it basically provided, low cost or very accessible healthcare to essentially all Americans, but specifically low-income Americans. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not in the medical system. I do have friends in the medical system who hated it, right? They were like, this is the worst thing that ever happened to doctors, and we made less money and whatever. To me, that's neither here nor there, right? What I thought was so interesting, that the use of language is so important. Because it was branded Obamacare and it was not branded the Affordable Care Act. And so you had millions of people who would qualify for the Affordable Care Act who did not currently have a health insurance, who were actively voting against it because it was called Obamacare and they did not support Obama. Right. And so when the Affordable Health Care Act was kind of rolled back or it was being repealed, and all of these people were losing, access to health insurance, and like, I need these prescriptions and I need this doctor, and I'm finding out, that I'm losing access to this and I can't pay for it. It was only then that they were finding out that they, in fact, were on Obamacare.
Of course.
And so that's what it makes me. And we all thought that was just like so ridiculous at the time, right? But DEI is the same thing. DEI has been the language of it has been weaponized.
1000%.
Right. So I saw something on LinkedIn that said we should make people spell it out. Like, you should say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then tell us exactly from those three words which ones that you have a problem with. Don't just say DEI, because DEI is like the new woke, which was the old Obamacare. It's just a branded version so they could sell it to the masses as like, this is the problem. I'm giving it to you in a bite-sized piece, so you don't have to think about the nuance of what we're actually talking about. And so honestly, the writing was on the wall for a long time. Like, people genuinely, this idea of the, it's so hard to be a white man in America right now. Like, where no one cares about us right now. And I remember watching an old sitcom, How I Met Your Mother, and there was an episode where the main character was auditioning to be a news anchor. She's a white woman. And they were like, oh, how'd the audition go? And she's like, oh my gosh, when I got there, everyone was so much more interesting than me. There was a Black woman there with blue eyes. And she basically said that in the sense that, like, I'm never going to get this job because there was a Black woman with blue eyes. Like, she was so interesting, and she's Black. And so, it's crazy because that show came out, like 10, 15 years ago. So it's like the idea has been seeded to this country for a very long time, in a funny way, in an approachable way. Oh, you go to a job interview as a white man, and there's a Black man in a wheelchair, and you're like, I'll never get this job because it's going to go to the Black man in the wheelchair. It's like a 2-for-1. Or on 30 Rock, with Tina Fey, them calling the Black character Twofer because he was Black and he also went to Harvard. Right. So they're like, oh, it's a 2-for-1. Yeah. And that's why his nickname was Twofer. So it's like, it's been seeded in this very nonchalant way that DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have specifically and only benefited Black people who are also somehow not qualified to do the jobs that they're being brought in to do. They're blaming plane crashes on DEI. They're making it seem like we're putting pilots in planes that don't have degrees or the correct certifications simply because they're Black or they're a woman, or it's ridiculous. But it's a easy story. It's an easy bite story. And so what people fail to realize is that DEI actually overwhelmingly benefits white women, because at first it was about equality of the sexes in the workplace, right?
Gender equality.
Oprah tells the story all the time about how she was a news anchor and she was making substantially less than her white counterpart. And when she asked why, they said, well, he has a family to support and you don't. And even though y'all do the same job for the same amount of time, he deserves more money than you. So DEI actually was helping to correct that. Now, I don't think that DEI, I don't think it was all good. You know what I mean? I think there were improvements that could be made, but DEI wasn't just giving Black people jobs. It was also ensuring that there were ramps for people who are differently abled, reintegrating veterans into workplaces so people understood, people with learning disabilities or mental disabilities, physical, people who are differently abled, making sure that there were concessions made so that all Americans had a fair shot at employment. That's what it was. So it's interesting again to watch this country vote against its own interests. And in the next, I've already seen the TikToks of people crying about feeling like they were tricked and, oh, I lost my job or I lost my farm. I lost, I'm losing my prescriptions. I'm losing my food stamps. Now really putting it together once again that I have voted against my own interests. And so, I think for the time being, it desperately needs a rebrand. We need to re-strategize, and we need to, especially as a Black woman, a lot of people keep asking me how I feel being in the corporate space and am I scared? And how do I say this?
Just say it.
A lot of times I felt like some of the programs that I went through, I would not be where I'm at without those programs. But I also felt like a lot of times I was getting pat on the head and saying, oh my God, you're so good for being like a Black girl.
Yeah, it felt
You know what I mean?
disingenuous.
It's a scarlet letter sometimes to be
Mm-hmm.
in these programs or simply to be existing as a Black person, because for some reason people think that every Black person in the workplace is somehow the result of DEI
A diversity
program.
hire. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's the diversity hire, which is just like, which is crazy, right? Especially knowing that if you're a Black person in America, they're gonna make sure you can do that job 80 times over before they hire you. So if anything, we're overqualified for the positions that we're in, and we watch people fail forward, you know, in other situations. And it's like, how did they get there? You know, like the police commissioner of New York not being a police officer, but she's the daughter of a billionaire.
Mm.
How did that work? But I'm the diversity hire because I'm Black, but maybe I spent my whole life on the force. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's just like upskilling, making sure that we are bulletproofing our careers by, I mean, that's really all you can do, in my opinion. My opinion is to, you know, I told a lot of people in my friend group to shift out of careers that were solely based on DEI. Like I saw the writing on that wall.
100%.
Because if you only have a job because people feel bad about something, so they're making these like grand sweeping statements about how they care and how they want to help, but it's not something that they've really been committed to the whole time. If you work at Ben and Jerry's, you're safe. You know, but everywhere else, it's like you can't. I just don't think it's the smartest thing to base your whole career about it. I think we should all be working towards it and contributing towards it, but basing your whole career around it is dangerous.
Yeah.
In this climate, and we don't know when this is going to be over. So I would just say upskilling, networking, strengthening your networks, and we all need an exit plan. We all need an exit plan. I think it looks different for everyone. What your exit plan might be out the country. Your exit plan might be, you know, my favorite LinkedIn profile is a guy who was like one of the first couple of employees at Google, and now he's a goose farmer. And like his resume is like 20 years at Google, or, you know, however long, and then goose farmer in Peru.
That's hilarious.
You know, like
Love
to
it.
me, that's dope, because it's like we all need that exit plan. We just might need it a little bit earlier than we think. So
yeah,
side hustles, upskilling, things like that. And then let's actually, and like I said, my good friend Gabby, she runs Kitchen Table, which is a phenomenal agency out of New York that works on a lot of marquee brands. She's been saying, she founded in part with other creators that I don't know their names right now, but they're also titans in their own right. It's a conference called Black Week. And the first one was this past year. And it's really just like a meeting of the minds of just all these titans. And she's been saying for years, like, we need a rebrand. We need a restructure. We need to re-strategize. Like, and I don't think we have the answer.
Ooh, yeah. My son fell.
Got excited.
I got excited.
I don't think we have the answer. And I don't think there is a clear answer. I don't think there is, you know, oh, we should be doing this. It's like, no, we need our titans to sit down and figure out what we're gonna do. Yeah,
there's so many things you just shared there. Rebrand 100%. I even feel like even with Black Lives Matter, I saw similar things happening too. I felt like the statement behind that needed a rebrand because I saw how people are going to manipulate it from the beginning, from the get-go. But I do feel you're right. I think, you know, one of the things that people can do, going back to the statement I mentioned before, focusing on what you can control, building relationships with people. I think, you know, I remember Trevor Noah, I read his book, Born a Crime, and he said, you know, one of the interesting things about hate or racism is, he's like, it's hard to hate somebody that you know. Yeah. It's easy to hate people that you don't know, or if it's over there in theory, right? You know what I mean? When you actually know someone from a different community, and when people are like saying like these outlandish things about a specific community, you're like, actually, I know somebody from that community. They are nothing like what you guys are talking about. So I think building relationships with people in your respective industry, what have you, is a great way to kind of, you know, future-proof your career, if you will. And I think, one of the interesting things about DEI, because obviously for me too, because working in tech as a black person
Mhm.
specifically, you're probably gonna be the only one or one of very few in whatever
Right.
department you're in. And so sometimes, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, that narrative can kind of seep in your head, right? Like,
Mhm.
did they put me here because I'm a diversity hire and they want to kind of
Yeah.
round their bases, right? It'll cross your mind. I remember even had a conversation about X about that. And he's like, Corey,
Mhm.
he's like, man, you just got to remember you are the only you in your room, irrespective of race, creed, religion, color. Just remind yourself of that. And I
Right.
think I always thought to myself, if a person ever came to me and tried to, articulate in some way that I am a diversity hire,
Mhm.
I had to think about how I would address that. What would my thought process be? And I think about the basic way that people hire people. Human nature tells us that in most cases, people hire people who look like them.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
a
one of
herd
the major.
mentality.
It's a herd mentality. So
Mhm.
if for someone to say, "Hey, you got hired because you're this color or this background," I could easily say, "Well, you got hired because you look just like them."
Yeah.
You know what I'm
And now
saying?
we're all looking stupid here. Okay?
Right.
Like now what?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. But I do feel like, to your point, the pendulum always swings. I did see the writing on the wall, and I agree with you. People that took those, VP of DEI
Yeah.
positions, I knew that their time was very limited. And those people, if they were being honest, I remember I had a conversation with someone in that position. I was like, how much like impact can you really make in that position? Are they giving you a budget? Are they
Yeah.
actually implementing programs that you can actually execute? Or is it just like a token position?
And a lot
And
of
I
them were actively saying that they weren't getting that. When the great
mhm,
resignation kind of happened around early last year, when all these major companies, their DEI heads were departing or being fired
right,
or being allowed to leave, but we all know how that conversation goes.
right,
They were saying they never got the funding they were promised. They never
right.
got the support or even the authority. If you have a VP title and you can't make a decision that sweeps
Mhm,
through the
mhm,
company, are you a VP? You
right.
know? Or are you just someone that comes in on Black History Month and Women's History Month and
Yeah,
it's a glorified content play,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, not to put anything on the stand, but it's like there are a lot of initiatives that simply exist on social media and not in real life. But they give
100%.
the illusion that this company cares and that they're doing something and this is important to them when really it's like three people and an iPhone,
Yeah,
posting things on social to
yeah.
keep a brand or an aesthetic alive. So and I've struggled personally and maybe you can help me with this because
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
I, growing up in my career, I've brushed up against a lot of these programs to help make sure that diverse talent is included. And so I'm very thankful for them, and I appreciate them. A lot of times I did feel like they put a scarlet letter on my chest too,
Mm.
because when people would hear, it's almost as if
Got
they were
wind of
like,
it.
yeah, it's like it puts you in this box of like, oh, like you
Mhm,
you
mhm.
you can only be here then. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Or the amount of times I would hear things like, we need someone more senior. And I'd be like, have you seen my resume? Or
Mhm.
did you just hear the type of program that I came through? And now you're
Right.
like, oh, this must be for people. The idea that because I don't have as much access, that I'm not as capable,
Mhm.
which is just the most interesting thing. Cause it's like, you know, at Spotify, I was in a program where only 4 people are allowed in a year.
Right.
And I got in. And
Mhm.
I know for fairly certain because they post it all over the internet, but the internship program at Spotify gets at least like 90,000 applications every
Right.
year,
Right.
and I'm not exactly sure the number that they're choosing, but it's not 90,000.
Mhm.
Like, and so when you think about how competitive these programs are, just in a general sense, where we haven't even talked about race, we haven't talked about sex, we haven't talked about economic background, location. We're simply just discussing the numbers of people who are interested in these 4 spots.
Right.
And I got in. And so it's like the idea that, you know, people can look at that and still come to the conclusion that maybe I was not qualified enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the program exists, when these programs truly actually exist because we are overqualified and yet we still don't have the same opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really trying to correct an imbalance and not create
right.
not create like an on-ramp, not create like an easy ramp
Right.
for the people to come into these different organizations. So I don't know, like there's so much that needs to be done
Yeah.
and thought about. And to be honest, like one thing that has kind of irked me is I want to be and a lot of people say this and they get like killed for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of don't say it the right way. But I've always wondered, like, being a producer, being a creative producer, and wanting to be known for my work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, the way I'm presented is like, this is Jasmine. She's an amazing Black creative producer, right? And it's like, yeah, I am. Yes, I am Black and a creative producer, but it's the same way we talk about Christopher Nolan and then we talk about Spike Lee.
Right.
Spike Lee is a genius, period. Spike Lee is a director, period. But when we're talking about him compared to a Christopher Nolan or a Scorsese, all of a sudden Spike Lee's the Black director.
Right.
You know, he's like, and it's almost like this asterisk they put next to your name. And on some cases, I'm like, yeah, let them know that a Black person did that, you know?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's also like, oh, well, then we only need to show Spike Lee films in February.
Right.
You know,
right.
or we only want to talk about your Blackness when it's time to be like, yeah, we like Black people. And so I've always struggled with that, being referenced as a Black producer. Or this is a Black owned business. This is a Black restaurant. The Weather Channel is Black owned. Like, is it helping us or is it making us a target?
I hear you on that one. And I've had that thought process. And I ever said, if I was ever to launch or to run a huge, massive corporation, I wouldn't promote myself as a Black owned business. I would just be a business that just happened to have predominantly Black employees. Because of what you just talked about, because I don't want to be put into that box. I don't even want the headline, because when you go on LinkedIn, first Black, I'm like,
it's actually embarrassing at this point. It's embarrassing. I don't want to hear that there's a first Black anything in 2025.
Yeah, and for me, it doesn't sound amazing. I think whenever we first started doing that at scale, I think it was interesting, but now I'm just like, nah, I wouldn't want that. I would tell whoever's writing the article on me, I was like, if you put that, you will not have my approval.
Yeah.
Don't
publish this.
Don't publish this at all. Cause I don't want that. Cause then it takes away from the focus of the product, the service that I'm actually doing, the reason why you want to interview me in the first place. But really quickly on the DEI matter, I always felt like it never got to a place where it was even really effective. And I think one of the challenges too is, I should let you know, one of my least favorite terms was BIPOC. It annoyed me because when you group all non-white people into the same category, to me it becomes ineffective because we don't have the same challenges. I remember hearing this directly from the mouth of this South Asian guy I worked with. He's like, I remember we're in one of these programs, DEI programs, and he's like, why am I here? He's like, the CEO of Google is Indian.
Yeah.
CEO of Microsoft is Indian. Like, I don't need this whatever reinforcement, whatever the program is for that day. It's like it didn't apply to me because it didn't resonate with him. So the fact that you try to bulk all non-European looking people into the same umbrella, like we have the same challenges, I feel like it was so disingenuous and it was ineffective, and it kind of turned people off, right?
Yeah.
And I never felt like DEI even got to the level where it was effective in the first place. So.
Yeah, and that's why I say we definitely, it wasn't batting at 100. Did it create, absolutely amazing opportunities for people? Yes. Was it what I think net it was beneficial, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I do think we weren't batting at 100 on that. So that's why I'm saying, like, in a way, maybe we take this happenstance to really reframe what it needs to be anyway. Because, you know, I was listening to some TikTok where it was talking about the reframing of DEI in general, because when DEI was initially established, there were more stereotypical barriers to entry around socioeconomic class, in the sense that,
Mm-hmm.
like, they're looking at it like the Black kids or the kids of color are the poor kids, right? And we just
Mm-hmm.
need to help them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how it was like sold through. And it's like, you know, should we now base it on socioeconomic condition across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have affluent Black families.
Right.
We have, like, one of my bones to pick was after the murder of George Floyd, a lot of companies were scrambling to give Black people money, you know, in
Mm-hmm.
different ways, shapes, or form, whether that was like doing business with them, starting grants with them, you know, just funneling it somewhere, platforming them. And a lot of the people that directly benefited from this money that was supposed to be this interesting corporate reparations of a sort, benefited, like, people that were either not Black American
Mm-hmm.
but happened to be Black, like they were part of the Black diaspora, which is like, I'm
Right.
not saying they don't also need assistance, but it's like you have a Nigerian billionaire, like, getting grants and funding because he's Black.
Right. He
And
checked. He
but it's
checked
like,
one fact in the box. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, I don't think we're, like, right intention, but I it might be going to the wrong place. And then you have people who are like people of color, or like who have spent their entire lives being white adjacent, are suddenly pulling out their Black grandma, you know, and now they're getting grants. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
there was a specific beauty creator who, you know, received millions of dollars in funding, and I have been following her for years. I didn't know she was Black. Like, I had never known she was Black. And then suddenly, when the money started being thrown around, all of a sudden she's posting pictures of her, you know, biracial Black grandmother, all of a sudden, just to be like, you know, actually, even though I've lived my life essentially as a white woman or ethnically ambiguous woman, I am in fact now Black. And then she was given all this, like, money and support. So it's just a really weird thing where it's like, what should it actually be based on in a modern world where the bar has been either lowered or heightened for different groups? Like, we're in arguably a better position. So what exactly, you know, I carry a ton of different privileges in my life. You know, I carry the privileges of having my parents who are supportive of me. I wouldn't say we're not rich by any means, but I'm definitely not worried that if something happens to me, I won't have a place to go. So I even carry my own privileges, being, you know, a light-skinned Black girl in America. I can sit with my cousins who are beautifully darker skinned, and I have to be aware that we're not having the same experience.
Right.
You know, like, even though, yes, I am Black and I was raised blackity, blackity, black, I can't sit here and say that I'm having the same experience as a dark-skinned Black woman. So it's like we all carry our own privileges in a different way. So what should DEI start to be based off of, and how can we reinforce it and make it stronger, and make it something that can't just be written away by the strike of a pen because companies decide they're not feeling it anymore? You know, how almost like Black nepotism. Like, how can we fortify it to where it's not corporate based and we're not relying on people in power deciding that it's okay to do, and it's something we integrate into our society, so you have no choice. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of, I don't have that answer, but
yeah,
I feel like that's where I hope to be at.
I think it's definitely got to be an ongoing conversation, and I think it definitely has to be nuanced and well thought out, and can't be just a cookie cutter approach. But Jasmine, as we wrap up here, to that young Black woman or Black man that's in high school or college, if you could only give that person one piece of advice, and they're looking to get into the creative / tech industry, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say the time is going to pass anyway. So just do it. I think when I was in high school and I was in college, I talked myself out of so many things because I felt at that age somehow it was too late. And that, you know, whatever track that I had set myself on was the track I needed to pursue because it was too late to kind of like abandon and do something else. So that's that. I think that's what I would say. I would say whatever you want to do, even if you're wrong, time's going to pass anyway. So I rather you spend 5 years, you know, running down a road and being like, yeah, this is it. And it's if you decide at the end of those 5 years that that's not what you want to do anymore. I guarantee you that experience will aid you in some shape, form, or fashion. I wanted to be a fashion stylist. I'm not a fashion stylist. Like I ran down that road for a long time until I realized that it just didn't align with what I wanted. As I learned more, you know, it just didn't align with what I wanted. So I would say the time is going to pass anyway. I would say that time in your life is meant to gather data. And then you'll get to a point in your life where you can start acting on that data. But do things, try things, fail at things, just create motion and keep creating motion in whatever you want to do. And then there will come a day where it will click, or maybe you'll find the thing that you didn't think it's not the thing you thought it was going to be, but you're not going to find it unless you get out there and start trying things and doing things. So I think that would be my piece of advice.
I love it. It's great and it's sound advice. Now, the fun part here before we finally wrap up. Remember that card game I told you about?
Yes.
It's in beta right now.
Okay.
I'm doing
it's exclusive.
I'm doing some focus groups right now. So I'm gonna pull a card from the deck.
Okay.
Okay. The first question I'm gonna ask you here is, what is a quote or a mantra that you're currently living by?
If you're silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it.
Woo! Oh, sorry. You gotta say that one more time, girl. You gotta say that.
And I'm blanking on who said that. It's a very, very amazing Black woman. But if you are, I think it's Zora Neale Hurston, I want to say. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong, because I deserve it. I should know who said that. But if you're silent about your pain, they will kill you and they will say you enjoyed it. And I've been living by that quote in the sense of like, I'm no longer going to be quiet about being uncomfortable. And that doesn't always have to be like a loud yelling thing. It could simply just mean like, I'm removing myself from this because I don't want you to think that I'm cool with it.
Right.
You know, like by proxy, by just being here. And so, yeah, I think when you put life through that lens, you start to realize how many environments that you stay in and how many conversations you don't enjoy.
Right.
And yet you don't say anything. And, you know, it's like when someone's making a terrible joke and it's offensive or something, and somebody is calling them out on it, like, yo, don't say that. And they're like, what? Everyone else is laughing. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't want to be that person that looks like I'm laughing if I actually didn't like the joke. You know, because then you're gonna take me not saying anything or my awkward giggle as permission to keep doing something dumb.
You know what? Right? I like that. I actually did that the other day. Noted. I
don't do that no more. And you know, and it's so funny because I just told my dad how to handle like a situation. He told me somebody said something crazy to him, and I said, you know, a lot of times, especially as a woman, we're socialized to just kind of be like, and then be like, you know. But I think it's important to let things be awkward, and I think we're all afraid of the silence, and I'm not afraid of the silence anymore.
I would agree.
And so when people say crazy things to you, I've started to practice, because it takes practice. I've started to practice just being like, what an odd thing to say. Straight faced.
I love it. I love it.
Or being like, explain that to me.
What do you mean by that? I love you. I love that.
And then let it be awkward. Let it hang in the air. Let them hear it, you know?
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to take you up on that. I actually am. So my friends, you know, fun fact, they call me controversial Corey because I am that guy that was sticking to him. But you know what? I temper that one in a corporate environment.
Of
I
course.
do. Because it's a little
Of course.
different. All right. Question number 2. What activity makes you feel good?
Ooh, walking.
Mm,
Walking has been changing my life, to be honest. Our moms were right, unfortunately. We just it's that phone, get off the phone and go for a walk.
I love it.
And learning that your brain calms down when you have rapid eye movement, which happens when you're walking,
Mm,
because your brain is surveying like your environment, and it's not
right.
something you're conscious of, but it's something that happens. And there are literally people who pay for, rapid eye movement therapy,
Mm,
pay thousands of dollars to help with depression and things like that. And honestly, you could just go for a walk.
love
So
it.
that's been killing it lately.
Love that. And the last question here is, and I think this is so perfect, and I did not plan this. It was literally just coming out of the deck. The question is, what is your brand?
What is my brand? Oh my gosh. I would like kind of like my personal brand or just like my brand.
Let's say
Like,
personal brand.
yeah, I mean, I think right now my personal brand, or at least what I want it to be, because I have to think, because brands, the famous Intuit quote is like, a logo is a mark, but brand is what people say about your business,
Right.
not what you say about
Hmm.
it, right?
Perception of you.
So
Hmm.
I would say my perception is that I'm just like uh, a hardworking producer. I come from like a really supportive community that is just like really invested in my success, and I feel very like lucky and honored to feel that way. So I would say my brand, to be honest, and I'm actually trying to change it, is that I work all the time and that I'm
Mm,
nonstop. I would say that people probably describe me under the guise of like hustle culture a bit, because I do
mm,
work a lot and I don't stop ever, and I used to take pride in that, but now I'm starting to realize that sometimes, the good news is you came a long way, but the bad news is you went the wrong way. Like sometimes
mm,
just doing a lot is not necessarily progress. Like you could just be running yourself ragged in a circle. So I'm really trying to be more intentional about how I use my effort and also resting. And
mhm.
I started junior year, which is my creative support group,
Yeah,
um, because I wanted to create an environment that creatives specifically could learn how to rest within each other in the sense of like
I
gaining
love that.
support. So it's something I was really passionate about, and it's almost like I'm preaching to myself. I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm also like
Yeah.
talking to myself, and there's no weird hierarchy. I didn't want to be seen as some expert. I just
Mhm.
wanted to create a safe space. I compare it to AA all the time.
Mm.
Like I wanted to be like we're all sitting in a circle and we're like, "Hi, my name is Jasmine, and I am addicted to working." Like, "Hi, Jasmine." Like that's what I wanted it to feel like. Like where none of us are more or less than the other. We're all just here to offer support in whatever way. And
Yeah.
so I would say, while that is something I'm hoping will be my brand, I'm hoping that, you know, when people think about me in 2 years, 5 years, that they say, she was well balanced. I'm hoping if I ever have children, they think of me and they think of their mother as someone who was well rested,
Mm.
like and she was calm and she was stress free and she was well rested. That didn't mean she didn't work hard, but I want to be the first generation of women in my family to be seen as leisurely,
I
and
love
not
that.
like my mom worked to the bone, my grandma worked to the bone. It's like I want to sit in the shade of the trees that my great grandmothers planted, and
Mm.
I want to also still be planting those trees for my great grandchildren. So that's my hope and my desire moving forward.
Listen, I love that, and I would also say your brand to me is a person who can very well articulate her thoughts. A person who has a ton of creative energy and focus, and it's very noticeable. So, your brand is very positive, and I can definitely relate to the hustle culture
Yeah.
mentality. I grew up with, sleep is the cousin of death. Uh,
Sleeping in
time
bed.
time waits for no man.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's something I'm working on. Like
Yeah.
literally, and listen, I'm a little bit older than you, and I could tell you this that the you can't make up for lack of sleep. it's a compounding effect. And I've noticed it that like it's starting to get to me. So now I have to like really focus on structuring my days so I get enough sleep. Because I have this kind of false narrative in my head. If I don't do this, I'm gonna miss out the FOMO. I gotta do, you know what I mean? So I'm glad that you're starting it now because it's harder to break that habit, especially Jazz, especially when you've had success out of
doing it. Yeah. It's a recipe that works. I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? It's a bad recipe, but it's a recipe that works. Yeah. And I think that's what's hard about it is because now you have to retrain your brain. I think a lot of us are trying to figure out what success actually looks like to us and not what we maybe thought it was. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you would ask me 10 years ago, success was like me touching a couple million, having it in my bank account, being some high-powered, fast talking, working woman in New York City, running around the city in my heels, going from the party to the bar, to the office, to the, all the things. And if you ask me what success means now, success means more like being debt-free, not having to work if I don't want to, being able to choose what I do with my time. So it's like I'm constantly redefining what success means because I got close to people who had everything that I thought that I wanted and they hate it. And they can't enjoy it. And the amount of people who are multi-millionaires who are getting 3 hours of sleep at night, who are on vacation on their phone the entire time, like they can't even enjoy. If you think about like a stockbroker, they can't even enjoy the money, because they're so stressed about the China markets and this market, and I need to be up for this, and Adderall to wake up, and Ambien to go to sleep. Like I want to be able to enjoy my life and sit in the sun. And, I don't think I need multi-millions to do that. I do think, I want to be successful financially, but it's like, don't make yourself a slave to the money by going out and get $1 million house and a, $50,000 car and all these bills. That means you can't sit down. So we kind of do a lot of these things to ourselves, where it's like we put ourselves in a cage and then we complain about being stuck, where it's like, who is that car for? Who is that house for? That you're keeping up. So
absolutely. So Jasmine, for the people that are listening to this, that are hearing you for the first time and they want to somehow collaborate with you, work with you, follow with you, get a part of your group, your organization, what's the best way for them to get a contact or get a hold of you?
Yeah, so DM me on Instagram. I answer all my DMs. Marie St. James, spell out the Saints. Also on Patreon, go to Patreon/Junior Year, spelled how it sounds. And you can find the creative support group. You can join, or you can listen to some of my content there. And yeah, that's really like the best ways to get in contact with me. I'm going to be launching more things soon, but all in due time. I'm not rushing myself. It'll happen when it happens. But yeah.
I love it. I love it. So guys, that concludes this episode of 3 Questions with Corey Kareem. And as you know, I always like to end with the saying, sometimes you don't need to hear or see anything new. You just need to learn that somebody else went through it too. So with that being said, Jasmine and myself are out. Peace and love. Until the next time.